Hi, my name is Shanae Wagner. I am the project manager for WESA schools and programs based in the Western Cape, but covering the Western, Eastern and Northern provinces.
Good afternoon, my name is Shane. I'm a location manager for large film shoots in and around Southern Africa.
Good afternoon, my name is Chris Adama. I'm the Director of Eco Services. We're an environmental management and control company servicing amongst others the film industry in South Africa and Southern Africa.
GREENSET approached me as a practitioner. My job as a location manager is typically to receive scripts or storyboards from our clients. Many of our clients are on the board over here: HBO Max, Sony, Apple, Netflix. They typically send a script to somebody like me, and we have to figure out where in Southern Africa we can film it. So my portfolio is essentially the geography of film shoots, and for the last 10 years we've been involved in multiple big productions, so Raised by Wolves, The Crown, Invasion 2, lots of different shows. My main portfolio is essentially to make sure that we've got locations to shoot in. So whether that's mountain, city, streets, houses, nuclear facilities, we send out a scout who typically goes and sources potential locations. We go and explore different things, we take photographs, and we eventually whittle it down into a short list. The directors then make choices about which of those shortlists they want to see, and whether it matches their creative vision for the show. We will then put a contract together, we will essentially do the legal side of it, and we will make sure that the obligations of the contract are managed properly from both parties. Unfortunately, from a location perspective, we are sometimes the only face between our clients overseas and the public. So often homeowners, building owners, the city, they will not meet anybody from Film Africa, from Moonlighting. They will never meet anybody from the production. We are the only people that they know, and so my team and our role is critical in terms of the overall optics of how the film industry is perceived in the public's mind. Recently we've had sort of massive road closures in Voortrekker Road. We do night shoots in suburbs, and for months and months we are the only people that those homeowners will see. So it's very important that our behavior and our practices are above board, because we will never get permits from the city if we are negligent in the way we do things. So in relation to sustainability, the way we treat the wastes, the materials that we use, as a location manager we have some input into that, and it's critical that at the end of the job we can say that we've tried our hardest to make it as sustainable as possible. And so in some places the City of Cape Town will insist that we have an objective party to be part of it, to make sure that we do what we say we're going to do, but they want somebody who's impartial to make sure that we're being judged fairly. So that's why we use ECOs. So it's critical that we have guys like Chris and his company to make sure that we do what we say we're going to do.
Thanks, Shane. Yeah, we were approached by GREENSET, and thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you guys today about being an ECO and what it takes, and how do you get there, and how does it all work in the film industry, and how what's the whole process. It's quite a complex journey. So we'll try and sneak in as much as we can in the time that we have. So typically, as a ECO or environmental control officer, or some people like to refer to it as an environmental compliance officer, you would require some form of tertiary education in environmental management, conservation, environmental science, geographic science. Over time, you tend to build an experience through exposure to the film processes and the activities, but without that foundation that you get through some form of study, it's kind of fast and loose. The big thing there is fundamentally standing in a position where you have to give guidance and make decisions for massive projects, that have financial implications for somebody else's money. It's as simple as that, So you can't just wing it. You have to have a good understanding of these processes. So step one, some form of study, and then from there you build on that. Typically, what we do with our team is we get the guys once they've done some time at university or Technicon or even UNISA or any of the other institutions that offer environmental qualifications. They come on board with us, and then we start exposing them to the film industry in little bits. Typically, at first on stills productions, and then slowly but surely you grow on that. So you get a really good understanding of when guys come to you. Someone like Shane will come and say, we're rocking up with the unit with 20 trailers, dollies, cranes, and this and that, and a million one other things. You actually have an idea of what's going on there. If you just have that film lingo, which I'm sure all of you are quite au fait with, and you dump that on the man on the street, it can be very overwhelming. We build the guys up over time. So it takes a long time to get to a point where you can walk on a huge production. Some of these projects that Shane and them have worked on, and you looked at to make decisions. And can we do this? Can we do that? How that all ties in with sustainability. In South Africa, and especially in the Western Cape, we're very, very privileged that we have such a diverse array of locations and landscapes in close proximity to a major hub being Cape Town. Within 2 hours, you could be in a desert. You could be. Let's have a look. We can go from forest. We've got desert. We've got beaches. We've got so much we can offer within literally an hour or two from Cape Town. Now the key is the sustainability in terms of a management aspect. During peak seasons, and we have these huge productions, you've got all this foot traffic and all this activity in these sensitive areas. If you don't manage that, it won't be long. Everything's destroyed. It looks bad. It's useless for other film productions, but now you've left a very negative footprint that takes forever to repair itself. And that's where the use of ECOs becomes key. And it's been such a game changer over the last 20 years when you look at the way film productions are now versus in the early 90s where there was no such thing. You can go to locations where we've had massive projects 2 or 3 weeks after they've been there, sometimes even a week after they've been there, and you can shoot it like this. Nothing's happened there. A good management tool to cultivate that connection with the crew, because you sit with a situation where if you stand in the corner and you're just waving fingers, trying to shout down rules and laws and things to people, it's difficult to get that to be a binding passion, and it gets ignored, Whereas if you can use a thorough understanding and a knowledge that you can engage with the crew or whether it's the producers or whichever, and make these things interesting for them, so they actually walk away with the lesson. So you're educating and you're uplifting at the same time. So that's in the middle of the nice in the forest, a huge production with Film Africa some years back, and we had massive crane things up and down in the forest there, crew of 100 people, and there's this little chameleon just like hanging on there for dear life. So I find this chameleon, and I showed it to the producer over there. I gave him a little rundown on chameleons and how sensitive they are, and that particular species is quite threatened. And there was just that small moment of connection, and the whole dynamic on the production. I mean, they had a really, really good environmental ethos, but all of a sudden, everyone in the crew and everyone's like paying more attention where they're putting things, how they're driving through stuff, how they're walking through things, watching what they're doing, and it's just that one small little moment of sharing and educating, and it can completely flip the dynamic of the project. So yeah, very, very small moments like that make such a difference, and that ultimately is what will drive sustainability, is try and get the concept and the passion and something that someone can connect with, so that they're walking away with a lesson, not just somebody told me to do it. And then as far as ECOs, where we work, where we travel, it's quite a diverse operation. I mean, you can see there. I mean, again, you're dealing with massive projects up rivers, in forests. There you got to deal with boats and helicopters, smoke machines. There's hundreds of crew. Should be a picture there somewhere at a barge with 2 toilets on it. you got to manage all these little elements. Well, little elements that you can see it like these huge elements to try and get this whole thing to work in such a way that when everybody leaves, the environment is still intact. Then you can go, further afield. We go there. There's the Northern Cape. That's the Richtersveld Desert. So complete extreme opposites, and you have to treat all these locations as equally sensitive because you don't have the big forests and big trees, but you got all sorts of reptiles, arachnids, tiny little microphyte plants and succulents and things that if you're just blindly trundling through the desert, you don't see these things, but they're there. So, and in the desert environments, because of the arid climate that it takes so much longer for these things to rehabilitate themselves. It could take decades, some places hundreds of years. So it's quite a key role. What has been quite good over the years with ECOs and drafting all sorts of protocols and sets and working with guys like Shane and the various locations teams is they've developed really good practices on how you can actually manage huge crews in very sensitive areas using simple tools. And there's a few good examples. You can see some special effects setups the guys are doing up on one of the beaches. It's another thing you got to keep in mind. Again, look at it, doing big fire sequences in the middle of fynbos areas out in the Cape Flats. I mean, you could go there the very next day, you'd have no idea, completely unscathed. I'm looking for construction sites. Another idea of some of the magnitude of the things you're going to have to play with. They typically build sets that can turn into a proper commercial or industrial construction site with big machines, big impacts. A machine like that's got hundreds of liters of oil that it can mess everywhere. So some good examples of, well managed sites. I mean, we're building ships right next on Strandfontein Beach. These guys are working in heritage areas, natural heritage areas, national heritage areas, which also all falls under the realm of the ECO. We're building sets in lagoons. If you look at this picture, this was a huge feature that was filmed there, and this is 5 days after the whole cruise left. There's nothing out of place, no litter, absolutely pristine. It's a really good indication of how, with the right management practices, and being absolutely sustainable. I challenge anybody to tell me that if you leave a location like that, keeping in mind that was bare sand before, just pointing that out. Animals, you got to deal with animals. They come with their own complications in terms of permissions, diseases, and all these things. Again, it's a completely sustainable practice, provided you manage it correctly and use the right protocols that are in place. Any questions so far? Anything? Go for it.
Hello.
Hello.
I just have a question. So I just wrapped on this film, and I wanted to ask, because there were things that I saw and I was like, so how do we just leave this now? So when you're choosing where to place base camp, when you're using cranes on certain pieces of land and building sets on land, and now you're taking them down or you're moving, unit move or what's that, and it's raining and you've caused this muddy mess, how do you guys then restore that piece of land to maybe the same way you found it or even better? What goes into restoring that?
Each site will require its own individual tailor assessment, and that would also be dictated by the type of impact and the scale of the impact that needs to be rehabilitated.
Can I just come in there as well? So that's my day-to-day job. It's figuring out where to put a base camp, what the impact is going to be, how we're going to fix it. But sustainability is not only looking outside at the planet, but it's also making sure that as a company, I hold my bosses to account. I don't want to be part of a company or an industry that is that likes to just walk away from environmental destruction. And so, on big jobs we have ECO companies like Chris, but on a normal job, sometimes we don't even have an environmental company. And so we still got to have those principles and those values that sit within the company, with or without an environmental company watching over us. So, it's about how we treat our waste, whether we make choices about bringing water bottles onto set, how we treat the crew when they're throwing coffee cups into the bushes. It's about the choices of driving ridiculous amounts of kilometers using diesel, how we bring the crew and the cast in. It happens way too often where we bring in a cast member from New York or from London for one day. They come in and they do their scene and then they fly out the very next day. So those are big environmental choices that we've got to make. In the past, we didn't have a lot of sensitivity towards those things, but a lot of companies these days are starting to push back on that and saying, okay, well, if you do that, we need to have some kind of environmental give-back scheme. And so in terms of the choices we make as a management team, how we design our base camps and our sets, those are all critical things that we're trying to impart on our crews. And it takes time. A lot of companies don't care. At the end of the day, it's show business, and as sensitive as I am to these things, sometimes we lose. Sometimes the decisions that get made are not in the best interest of the environment. But I'm in a good position, and Chris is in a good position where we can actually allocate some resources to make sure that we put it back as best as we can. And whether it's a soccer field or whether it's a field in the middle of the Northern Cape, either way, we are trying to be part of a new way of doing these things. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Yolanda. I don't know, I have two things. One is a question, one is a statement. I'm going to start with the statement. Like for a film that I was working on, recently we went to Prince Albert and then we were shooting there in the Karoo. And what we did is to help the environment, the production bought butt bags for cigarette smokers, where instead of throwing their butts on the ground, they can put it in the butt bag, and that was quite something. Anyway, passing that. I have a question about the statement we keep making that you need to leave the environment as it was or better, and maybe one of the ways to make it better is to plant a tree or something. Now, I don't know the depth of which tree to plant at which place, because there are trees that are not supposed to be growing in certain places. Like then, if I'm working for a local production and there's no there's no budget to hire maybe GREENSET, and there's no budget to hire an whatever. Sorry guys, then. Where do if that task is given to me, maybe I'm the one who's like, guys, here I am bringing this up.
So if I can just say, I mean, without any experience, the first place to start is GREENSET themselves. On the last 5 or 6 years, GREENSET have been part of our big productions, and they will be the best people to give you some advice. It might not be tree planting. You might be better off by not bringing in bottles of water. It might be better for the environment for you to take a bus to Prince Albert. It might be better for you guys to do also support a local charity. There's lots of different ways of doing it, and how you treat your waste is equally as important. But GREENSET would be the perfect start to that exercise. There's lots of exercises like we issue all of our crew with water bottles, with aluminium water bottles, so we don't have to use bottled water. We have bottled, machines on site that give you, proper water, and so people can go at all times. On any normal day, we have between 350 and 500 people on set, and some people care about the environment. They'll put their cigarette stompies into the right place. Lots of people won't. And so it's about creating processes and systems inside your set that will support the environment as well as the creative vision of the shoot.
Just to add to that, I think also, if you're already in your mind asking those questions, what can I do? You're already a step ahead of the next guy, because so many people will walk away and not think about it twice. And with a bit of just coming back to the whole the mindset thing, and now you just got to broaden that scope. But it's very easy. I mean, you can even go so far, reach out to the local community, and they often have all sorts of environmental projects and programs and things going on there. Whether it's cleaning a riverbank from a bunch of rubbish, that's you're leaving a positive legacy. It's easy for us to have, whether it's a film production or any other kind of commercial venture, and to take from the environment, and we benefit from that. That's one thing. Sometimes you don't have to necessarily give as much back, but by doing something else that's positive, you're actually having a bigger positive input than going and planting a whole bunch of trees. Maybe you work in an area where they've got a big problem with invasive plant species, and that impacts water. It impacts a number of things. Get on board with the alien clearing programs. Take some of those things out. Cost you very little. The infrastructure's already there. So coming back to what I said earlier, is like the fact that you're already thinking about, we've filmed here, we've done this, how can I make it better? What I've done here is a huge positive. It's massive credit to you for thinking that way. Now the challenge to you is that you got to encourage your peers and your fellow crew members to think the same. And that ties in nicely with what I was telling the story about. The chameleon, just small little positive encounters and experiences and connections with the environment and with nature, and leaving that positive legacy. It'll go so far. If everyone does just one little bit, it'll have a much bigger impact than one person trying to do a lot. Does that answer your question?
Question. Good afternoon once again. I want to ask, how do you aid things like, maybe let's say you've made a scene that has fire or explosives, so a scene that basically have like lots of carbon being released into the air. How do you curb that?
So to curb it is a very difficult thing, because if that's what they need to do the scene, and that's what they want to do with the scene, it becomes very challenging to try and persuade them not to do it, because there's going to be, you introduce a lot of carbon. The only way really is to then turn back and try and offset your carbon footprint by trying to leave positive legacy elsewhere. So the catch is, what you can do is challenge the in that case, let's say the special effects guys, is that they can give you the stats on the products that they're using, so that you can calculate what that carbon impact is, and that gives you a measuring stick of where you can say, well, this is what we need to achieve.
What we're trying to do is to make sure productions actually account for all of that. So at the end of the day, you can show what your carbon footprint is of your production, and then there's a multiple menu of things that you can do to try and mitigate that. So to try and get to a carbon neutral film shoot is a long-term goal. Right now, we're not there, but certainly we're trying to put in place those accounting practices that take into account how much water we use, how much diesel we use, how much polyurethane we use, how much we throw away, for the food waste. We're catering for 500 people every day, 3 meals a day, and there's an incredible amount of food waste. So often it happens, the guys, they run to the food table, they get a meal, they take 2 bites, they get called back to set, they throw it away.
Yeah, and just to add to that, measure what you can, and then work from there. Start with the big things. Airlines, you're already paying a carbon tax on that, but based on your air travel and your number of flights, you already have a good indication just on that you can associate that impact directly to your project. So you add things like that onto your diesel, your fuel accounts, etc. All of those are numbers, those are hard stats that you have. It's not a whole bunch of work to try and work it out. If I compare to your question about the pyrotechnic explosion, that becomes a very technical calculation to work that out. We've got all the other stats already, which are far bigger negative than one fireball. So we start with what we know, and then over time one can kind of filter that into the more detailed bits and pieces as you go along.
My question is that I know that maybe not all of us here have studied environmental management or have studied conservation or have like a background in environmental management basically. So I know that in certain parts or in certain protected areas or in certain nature reserves specifically, you guys have to go through a process in order to be able to shoot in those places, right? That's also because of the sensitivity of the area. So what is the actual process of you guys making sure that you guys are able to go through and shoot at that particular place? What is the process that you guys have to go through? Do you guys have to approve certain documentation like permits or anything like that that you go through to be approved so that you're able to shoot at that particular place because of course the sensitivity of the area?
I'll take the first part of that question. Let's say, for instance, a story comes to us and they want to shoot a scene in a forested environment, and it requires some local tribesmen on in a river, and the story requires a village to be built, and so I would then go out, take photographs, and we're trying to identify places in South Africa where typically it could be shot. Maybe it's a tropical forest that they're looking for, and we would identify places at a desktop level where we look first. So it could be a South African national parks area, it could be a Western Cape nature conservation area, it could be private land. The processes are very different for all of those. We go back to the management authorities and say, we want to do this. And in order for us to make it happen, we have to engage a company like Chris, who then puts together an environmental management plan. And then we go to the authorities and say, this is our management plan. This is how we're going to treat waste. This is how we're going to treat parking, diesel. This is how sensitive we are going to be to the local wildlife, whether it's baboons, antelope, lions, elephant, whatever it is. The environmental management plan is a critical piece of document that convinces them that we are going to treat it seriously. And we have to be held accountable to that. At the end of the job, there has to be what we call a location release form. And that release form is a critical piece of administration for us. It shows everybody that we've done what we said we're going to do. And we can get into a fair amount of trouble. We can open ourselves up for fines if we don't do that.
Afternoon, Chris and Shane. Thank you guys for coming through. First thing I want to say, kudos to you guys for making sure that you look after the locations. I have worked with different productions where I work both of you guys. And then I also want to ask the question, do you guys, is a criteria when it comes to productions? Because I feel like I see you mostly on a bigger production scale-wise, and then also on the local productions or smaller productions, we don't really see much eco, which also I think it's for us it make it a lack in our side as well, because of yes, we know what we're supposed to do. I mean, we're human, but yet we're always doing otherwise. I just want to double check, is a scale for you guys or only work based on the budget? Thank you.
Sure, it's a tricky and a dangerous one. Now you answer that one. Throwing me under the bus here. At the end of the day, look, with the environmental officers, it is an independent service, so there is a cost associated to that. I like to believe that more and more you're getting production companies and projects to say, you know what, let's just get somebody on it, because it gives us that peace of mind that we know there's somebody else that's watching out for the environment and the location from an environmental accountability standpoint and sustainability and compliance, and we can worry about making film. But it's not enough, you know. It is getting better. But if I compare that train of thought to 20 years ago, where it was non-existent, I mean, ECOs in the early days, my team and I, we've been in this game for almost 20 years, and in the early days, ECOs were like a swear word. Like, you're like, how dare you tell me I've got to pay somebody to stand here and tell me I can't park on top of a Protea, you know, like. But we've come so far, you know, over this time. So, yeah, so budget does have some bearing on that.
Yeah, if I can also just say, I mean, there are mandatory places where you have to have an environmental officer. Sometimes the smaller shows are as environmentally destructive as the big shows. And ultimately it comes down to somebody like me or somebody in the production team who forces the issue at a management level. So often I've used Chris in many cases where I don't have to. But it gives me a whole lot of comfort that I've got somebody else who's watching, because sometimes I represent the production companies, but I have an obligation, a legal obligation, to look after a farm or a house or something like that. And I've got a small team, and so by me employing an environmental company, it means I've got more than just me watching my back, effectively. And sometimes we have to be policemen, we have to be sheriffs, and say, you can't park there, you can't pull that tree out, you can't start a fire there. We have to. So
Yeah, it's a technological revolution. Do you guys see it as a solution or a challenge? And how are you guys? Yeah, so basically that's my question.
okay, so I'll give you a couple of examples in terms of how we've used technology in the last couple of years. So one of the big shoots we wanted was a very alien-looking landscape, and we could build something like that. We could take a 6-hectare size farm, and we could build an alien-type landscape. But we looked around the world, and we found an amazing sulfur-type field in Ethiopia. We sent a drone team there. They worked in 50-degree heat for 10 days. They filmed every single angle you could as a drone team. They came back, we projected that footage onto a massive LED screen. And instead of us building, having an environmental cost for months and months and months, that technology then got used in a stage. So what we're seeing now is a lot more use of LED screens. The one that we've just finished filming last week, we had an LED screen that was 60 feet high. And that's sort of a 20-meter high LED screen where we're projecting things on. Where in the past we might have had to try and create it in the field, or we would have been on a farm or on location. So definitely technology is changing the way we do things. The use of LED screens, the use of LiDAR and photogrammetry techniques is changing the way we do filmmaking. So sometimes on sets now, you won't know the difference whether it's a real location or not. But it's created artificially inside an environment, inside a lab, and there were no environmental costs to it whatsoever. You'll see explosions, you'll see gunshots, you'll see, all sorts of things, but we created that in a stage. So there's absolutely, in some cases that's an exciting direction where it's going. And there is a dark side to it as well, but for now we're looking at a very positive direction that the technology is going to take the filmmaking.
20 years ago, things like sky panels and all these things, didn't exist. On a commercial, you'd rock up with a 10-ton box truck full of filters and gels and HMIs, and there's 2 generators and 20 kilometers of cables. Now today, you get rock up with a sky panel and 2 batteries, an EcoFlow, off you go. Camera equipment, it's been a massive game changer. Cameras are smaller, lighter. You can achieve so much more with so much less. You don't have to have such a massive camera cranes to deal with these things. Everything is so small and light. So I think technology definitely has had a very, very positive footprint in that respect.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That was absolutely inspiring, actually, to be part of that conversation. My name is Shanae Wagner. I am a project manager with WESA, and I've been asked and invited here today to present on who WESA is and what we do, but also I was tasked with a special topic to introduce to you guys. Okay. So before we get started, I'd like to please just also share a disclaimer with you guys. I am fairly new to WESA, so please, if you have questions, keep that in mind. I might not know everything right now, but I will try to endeavor to get you the answers that you require. All right. So the topic that I was asked to sort of present about is actually something that is so fitting. It's something that WESA aims and strives to work towards or work against or combat. And it's also, it's actually called the silent crisis. Just raise your hand if you've ever heard about the silent crisis. Okay, there's a few. So for those of you who don't know, the silent crisis is the biodiversity loss that we're currently experiencing around the globe, right? It refers to a decrease or the decline in the variety and the abundance of species that we find in an ecosystem or on a global scale. And that is due to either extinction or populations declining at a significant rate, right? I can't say last year, in 2022, the WWF did a global project. So they looked at research from all around the world on all the species that they could find. And they published the Living Planet report. And the first line in that report read, wildlife populations plummet by 69%. Now that is shocking. That is unbelievably shocking. The fact that the information that we have of the species that we research. Remember, not all species have been discovered, and not all species are being monitored at that level. So there are still some species that we don't even have information on. So of those that we do have information on, unfortunately, the stats show that they are declining at a very alarming rate. And that is the silent crisis. But why is it called the silent crisis? So if you can just pop to the next slide. I just wanted to check. Some of these were news to me, and I wanted to see if perhaps it was news to you. So sit there and think about it. So if you can go, the first one. 1 million of the world's estimated 8 million species of plants and animals are threatened by extinction. So this is taken from the United Nations Environmental Program. An eighth of all the species that we have in the world are currently threatened. 75% of the Earth's land surfaces has been significantly altered by human activities, including 85% of wetland areas. So I don't know if you're noticing a trend here, but these are very high percentages. These are not low percentages, right? 75% of the Earth's land surfaces, and of that 75%, wetlands, if you look at the reverse, only 15% of wetlands are unaltered. That is scary because wetlands play such an important role in our ecosystems. And then lastly, because I'm a lover of the ocean, 66% of ocean areas impacted by human activities, either fisheries or pollution. And I mean, the ocean, it's vast. You can't even say how big it is, but 66% of our oceans are impacted. And that is alarming, and that is why this is sort of seen as a silent crisis, because not a lot of people realize that this is happening. We often hear about species like the African penguin being endangered. We hear about the pangolins in the previous slide that are critically endangered. But when we look at the biodiversity loss, we're looking at all of these species because each species has a specific role that they play in the ecosystem. And when you look at the bigger picture, looking at all of them and how they interact, that is when you actually get the bigger picture of what is actually going wrong. Okay, and then lastly, what I just wanted to share, go ahead, is how this impacts us, because ultimately we rely on our ecosystems, right? So we have the causes being climate change, pollution, overusing our natural resources, habitat destruction, and then alien invasive species. So I like the comment that I think Chris made about planting the right species in these areas, because we could actually be counting towards biodiversity loss by doing that. So those are some of the causes of biodiversity loss. And then on the other side, we have the effects where species become extinct. Because we lose out on certain species, we have an increase in carbon dioxide or CO2 emissions. we have an increase in pests because the predators are no longer able to control their populations. And then threats to humans, right? Because at the end of the day, we rely on ecosystems. We rely on ecosystem services. We rely on it for our food, for food, and also medicine. So by not taking care of this, we are actually creating bigger problems for us in the future. One of the main core functions of WESA is to combat and protect and to promote the biodiversity or restore biodiversity. So our mission is to educate, advocate, and act for environmental and social justice, to create strategic partnerships, and to also drive conservation programs. And we do this through creating or impacting climate action. We want to promote and protect the biodiversity in the areas and also reduce pollution. Now, WESA, which stands for the Wildlife and Environmental Society of South Africa. It's one of the oldest organizations in South Africa, actually. I think in the next couple of years, we'll be 100 years old. So we have quite a long-standing history of taking care of South Africa's biodiversity, and we hope to continue that going forward. Now, our organization is multifaceted. There are several different departments. It's quite big. I can't spend 20 minutes explaining everything to you. However, I do want to share a little bit about what I do and how I form part of this project and this organization. Before I do that, we have at WESA a theory of change model that we use, and we believe that through our education programs, we want to inspire the next generation so that they can advocate and act for a healthier planet for all of us to thrive and survive on, right? So that is what we do. We educate to advocate and act for a healthy and sustainable planet. And now the schools and youth program that I form part of, or department, if you want to call it that, we are the sole and proud implementers of three international programs that belong to the Foundation for Environmental Education, FEE, right? Now, FEE is also a very well-known and the oldest environmental education organization in the world. They currently have over 100 members, as well as are present in more than 81 countries. So WESA is and has been the implementer of three of their programs in South Africa since 2003, and we are basically implementing on behalf of the government and on behalf of the public sector, with the hope that we are, upskilling and developing our youth so that they can tackle these challenges going forward. This is just an overview of sort of where the FEE programs take place. You can see it's quite a diverse area and quite a lot of countries that are involved, but also keep in mind that these countries all have different ecosystems, different challenges, and different spaces that they work in. All right, so how we do this is through a tiered model. So we try to look at it in a sort of holistic picture. We're not coming in there and doing things. We are upskilling people, training them, giving them the knowledge so that they can go forward and have projects and create projects that they run on their schools. So firstly, with our school leadership support, so we try to create capacity, we try to create partnerships between schools, between organizations and schools and campuses to allow for that knowledge sharing, but also that skills development to take place. Secondly, we have teacher support, so that is where we host workshops with teachers that are in the environmental education field. We have specially created CAPS-aligned documentation and things that we share with them so that they are able to take that with them as they teach the learners in our schools. We then also have the learner development section, which is where we work with the students directly, and we upskill them, we give them knowledge, we help them host their own projects that they then, filter throughout the school. It's not, like I said, it's not us coming and getting involved to run the project. We want them to be the custodians of our future. So we upskilling them and making sure that they understand what we're facing and they start thinking bigger picture. This is just a couple of stats from our last year that we had. So we've reached, thousands of learners. We've reached thousands of educators. In the bottom over there, you can see the impact that we've had on waste, because that is quite a big sector of our school programs. One way that we sort of try to incentivize it with our schools is that we have an Eco Awards program. So on the right-hand side, you'll see there's different sort of levels in that pyramid, and schools take part annually, and as they run their projects at their school, they achieve different milestones. At the end of the year, they submit a portfolio of evidence that we grade, and they then are awarded a certificate based on that. So the idea is not that it's a sort of once-off situation. The idea is that once they've got their projects running this year, next year they'll take on a new theme and they'll have new projects based on that, while the others, the previous year themes, are still running, okay? So we don't want it to be a sort of, once-off type of situation. We want these things to be running continuously going forward. Okay. So this is just a bit of a visual representation of what the different tiers would involve. So teacher capacity development. So these are workshops that we've hosted with teachers from our different schools. We've either taken them out to visit actual sites. So this is a solar plant that they've gone to visit to sort of understand the ins and outs of how that works. We're trying to get them engaging with experts in the field so that they get the proper information. Teachers that have studied multiple years in university but haven't had any physical training and teaching on how to host experiments, how to run a water test, how to do a mini SAS assessment. So training and workshops like this are vitally important, specifically when teachers are not as confident as they need to be when faced with 40 learners that you now have to show how to do this experiment, okay? Some of the action projects which I think is the most rewarding is the learners. They would be involved in things like food gardens, where they plant food that goes back to the school and becomes part of the feeding scheme program, right? We have waste projects that they run in the past, and they've run cleanups, beach cleanups, school community cleanups. On the top picture over there, you can see that's actually a bench that's been made from eco bricks that they've collected. So these are projects and things that have been run by the kids, started by the kids, done by the kids, and at the end of the day, that is their mark and how they are making a difference. Over here we have biodiversity and nature, and this comes back to that planting that we mentioned earlier on. Making sure that, they're planting species that are native to the area, indigenous species, species that are carbon-hungry plants, so that they can, get rid of some of the carbon dioxide in the air. We have projects that are based on water, so either testing water or testing rivers to see what the quality is like. So those are some of the action projects that learners have done in the past, right? And so now I want to pose a question to you guys. What are you going to do? Because you are going into the world of work and you're busy working already. But what are you going to do as part of your personal impact and your personal giving back to our environment? Okay. And that is it from me, guys. Any questions? Yes.
I have two questions actually from my side, right? Number one is that I mentioned earlier on, we are all not environmental management graduates. We are all not conservation graduates, which, are people that might be aware of WESA and what WESA does. Mm-hmm. Number one is, can you please explain, because you mentioned earlier endangered, the word endangered, because some of us don't really know what that word is and how much of an impact that word is in conservation or in environmental management. Please explain that word for me. Okay, I'm going to pose another question. Another question is, I think he over there posed a question about the fact that we are all young individuals and most of us are looking for jobs. Let's be honest about the fact that our unemployment rate is very high in South Africa. So most of us would like to know where exactly can we or can you give us an idea of maybe how WESA jobs, vacancies that are actually available in WESA? How did you get into WESA? Or what are some of the ways that people can be able to access WESA and be able to go and apply for jobs? Because at the end of the day, we are in need of jobs and we need to know these things. And we are here for that and for you guys to actually give us that. Yeah, I think that's my question. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, so let me deal with endangered first. So there is something known as the IUCN Red List for threatened species, and that list basically grades how in trouble a species is, right? So you have species that are not threatened, they may be vulnerable, those are sort of the lower levels. But as you move up that level, your rating becomes sort of higher, you get to threatened, you get endangered, critically endangered, functionally endangered, and then extinct. Okay, so that's sort of the last one. How a species is sort of measured depends on a number of different factors. The IUCN has this specific sort of like framework that they use to evaluate the species. So they look at numbers, they look at what is the chances of the population growing in the future, is there any genetic diversity in the population, those types of things. So it's quite complicated, but ultimately that label gives us a better idea of where or how worried we should be for that species. So threatened specifically, I think, is sort of fourth last, if I can say. Endangered is third, and then you've got two more stages before you become extinct, unfortunately. And unfortunately, there are several, endemic species to South Africa that are quite high up on that ladder. Then your second question regarding, getting into the field of conservation, getting into organizations like WESA. If I can just maybe share my story. After studying, I, of course, you need to find a job now. You can't sit at home. The way that I went into it was through an internship. It was not a very well or lucrative paying internship. It was very, very little money. Basically just covered my travel. But in order to give myself that exposure and in order to give myself that experience, which is often necessary, you make that sacrifice, right? So there are several internship opportunities in the Western Cape that I'm aware of, and it would be your responsibility to go out and look for those opportunities because they are held with different organizations. So I know SANBI has the GREENSET program that runs. You have programs by the NRF, you have programs by the HSRC. So finding out those programs, maybe sacrificing for a year, doing an internship that's not going to be paying you big bucks, but it's going to be giving you that skills and really milking an internship for what it's worth. So asking your mentor questions, getting any training opportunities, upskill yourself through that. And then from there, build your personal sort of brand in the industry. Like you would in the film industry, I'm assuming. Make sure that you are making a name for yourself, that people sort of know who they speaking about when they speak about you, because at the end of the day, you want to be able to, approach an organization and have them already have heard about you some way or the other. That is just my personal sort of experience and sharing with you, and then making sure that you. I want to say, making sure that you are looking, making sure that you are constantly looking for opportunities.
Afternoon. Thank you for your time. I just want to double check. Do you, as a WESA and other environmental companies, do you guys think that you are reaching enough numbers when it comes to schools, when it comes to educators? Because yes, I have come across, because I also feel like as the time goes by, there are kind of certain schools that are kind of being targeted, like which is your kind of your private schools was, and then yet there are less of local schools. So I just want to pose a question: do you guys think are reaching enough learners and educators?
So, I mean, the answer is always going to be no. Are you reaching enough? No, we're never reaching enough. We can always reach more. And I think that is one thing I think that sort of pulled me to WESA, is that the programs that they offer, the Eco Schools program, for example, it's not only made available to the affluent schools, the schools that can afford, running these projects on their own. There's a very big focus on schools that are under-resourced and in under-resourced communities. And, those are the communities that they focus all of the funded programs on. So schools, and I can share with you the current schools that we're working with. Those are schools that are sitting in Khayelitsha, Gugulethu, Langa, and Philippi. That's one project that we're running at the moment. So we've got those schools sitting in those communities, because you've got thousands of kids attending those schools, teachers that are dealing with, large classes, and potentially not enough, resources in terms of time and funds that are available to those schools to be able to launch those programs. Okay. All right. Thank you guys so much.